Welcome to Apologetics for the Rest of Us podcast with Dr. Ray Ciervo. This podcast seeks to simplify the complex challenges to our faith for the everyday follower of Jesus Christ. You'll discover how to give answers to everyone who asks you about the hope within your heart, as Dr. Ray explains not only what we believe, but why we believe what we do. And now here's your host, Dr. Ray Ciervo.
Hey, this is Ray Ciervo of No Pat Answers, and this is Apologetics for the Rest of Us. You can learn how to be a Christian case-maker. It isn't all that difficult. You just have to put some effort into it. There are subjects that every Christian should know that will help them be a witness for Jesus Christ. And apologetics, sometimes called pre-evangelism, is really how we mix it up with unbelievers and skeptics and doubters and help them understand the reasons why we believe that we do. And one of the most important ministries that we have today is to our young people. We find that there are something like 70% of our young people who grow up in the church will walk away from their faith while they're in college or once they're beyond the age of 18. The reason is they've never been told the reasons why we believe Christianity is true. They've been told things like, you just gotta believe, or just put your faith into this, and never been told that they have the ability or the right to ask questions and then get good, sound, reasonable answers that are also relevant to their situation. So today on the show, I interview a young man who's part of our church, been part of our church all his life, and he's very articulate. His name is Kellen, and he's going to respond to some of the questions that I ask him about the relevancy of the church to his generation. So without wasting any time, let's get right into this and look and listen to what Kellen has to say. Okay, so we've got Kellen Dooley here, and I've known Kellen, I would think, all of his life. He's been part of our church here in Long Branch, New Jersey. But Kellen, I'm going to leave it to you. Instead of me trying to tell your story, I'll let you tell us your story. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up in church, and what your pursuits are today.
All right. I'm 15. I'm a sophomore in high school. I'm homeschooled. I do speech and debate, as well as I'm in a pre-military program. Growing up in the church has been interesting and fun. A lot of great experiences for me have come out of it, a lot of learning and wisdom. And of course, chances to do things like this.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's all. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I wanted to have Kellen on and interview him is because, from my perspective, I'm at the stage in life where I'm looking at, okay, who do I pass on a legacy to? Who are the young people that are coming along behind in their lives now? And how do I interact with them? I was just telling Kellen, one of the things I do when I speak to a young crowd, to either college group or high school or youth group, is I'll tell them that I have them at a disadvantage because they don't know the world I grew up in. I see the world they're growing up in, but I'm not a teenager or young adult. But they don't know the world I grew up in. And part of my task, I think, is not just to understand them, but have them understand me. And would you say that's a good way to approach it?
I think that's a great way to approach it. Mutual understanding is a very important thing, especially when younger people are coming up, that it means a lot that older folks try to engage and understand the different challenges and the different world that younger people are growing up with. And I think it's also important for younger people to approach that in the same way, to understand the wisdom and the life experience that older people have. So I think I'd agree, it's very important for mutual understanding.
Yeah, I think that people my age are really short-sighted, personally.
I agree.
That's okay. We won't edit that out either. But I think we're short-sighted in that, okay, I've lived my life, we did it, and now, it's up to you. And there's a disconnect between the generations. When I was in the 60s, they called it, first time I think the sociologists looked at it, called it a generation gap. That there was a separation between those who had already become 30s and 40s and parenting and their teenagers. So there was this gap, and that gap never got met. So one generation has gone on, which would be my parents' generation, and now I'm at the place where I'm a grandparent, even a great-grandparent, and I'm thinking of what's my legacy to these younger people, family-wise and in the church. How do I interact with them where I'm acceptable to them and let them understand that they're acceptable to me? In other words, we can have a relationship knowing that, there could be 30, 40, 50 years between us, but we can still have a relationship where I can learn some things about the way you see the world because you're seeing it very differently than I see it. But you can also learn some things on how I see the world. Would you think that's a good thing, or?
I do. I think that's a very good thing, especially with approaching problems that come up in the church and in the world. Looking at an issue or a problem from two different perspectives brings forth new things and new ideas, and the constant communication and
The communication right.
And the understanding helps solve those issues, right?
Yeah. One of the things that we chatted about just a little bit before we started to record was I asked you if you thought that the church in general, evangelical church, was relevant to your generation. And I just want you to comment back on those things.
Well, the short answer is no. I don't think that the church does an excellent job at reaching out to younger people. I think that there is definitely an attempt made, but the thing that I consistently see is either a church will sacrifice some of the gospel and some of the message of Jesus in order to reach young people, or they are not willing to reach out to younger people, not going after them, right? Not
reaching them where they are.
Well, not reaching them where they are and being. I'm looking, not accepting. It's helping them
right.
Get out to church, helping them with childcare, or I know that's a big issue for people, for younger people who have kids. Church is helping them with childcare and just helping them get into a place where they can go to church, where they can, where they're in the place. You set them up and you serve them to be in the place where they can receive the gospel and and they can learn more.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I think of is we want church to be interesting. Obviously, I think the church is very interesting. I think what the church believes is very interesting. And it's not so much that the activities are interesting, which I think, from my perspective, is where churches they fall down, even though they may get a group of teenagers in or young people in. It's more for the activity than it is for the substance of what they need to learn. Because someone said, most youth groups is about playing guitar and eating pizza, and not really dealing with why we believe Christianity is the truth. It's the true religion. Why the biblical worldview is the right worldview. Some people say it's the only worldview. It's the only real worldview as far as I'm concerned. I think the Bible is the only thing that definitely sees the world accurately, if we understand the Bible correctly. And so it's how do we communicate that to young people, that give them a roadmap, basically, for their life. So to me, that's the struggle that I see. Would you think that's the right way, or do you think how do we make it more about the substance of what we believe rather than the activities for young people?
I think you put my thoughts into words there. I think you did it much better than I did. But I think a transition from activities to, you can tie in your activities to a gospel message, right? You can promote discussion, fun discussion. You can pose fun questions that you can spin to point towards Jesus and towards the gospel and towards Scripture. So it's, yes, you're getting that that message and that information and the core part of church, but you're using activities to achieve that goal.
Gotcha. So, like years ago, you would go to a Bible study and everybody would sit in a pew or sit in the rows, and whoever the teacher was, a Bible teacher or the lecturer, would stand at front with a lectern and just basically do his teaching. And there generally, if I remember correctly, there was no discussion afterwards. Whereas today, I think, and you could tell me if I'm right or wrong in this, I'm really open to it. The idea of a discussion is more relevant to young people. They want to be able to input something into the discussion, even though they may know very little of it. That's what I find with, even when I teach a class. I mean, this is in South Africa, but I find that giving them opportunity to ask questions and to comment on what I'm saying is very important to them. It's something that really helps them feel like they're a part of it, rather than just someone who's sitting there taking notes about what I'm saying. Would that be something that, when we talk about activities or... So we're going to interrupt and just take a short break right now, listen to this message, and come back.
If you're enjoying Apologetics for the Rest of Us, we invite you to help support us. You can donate by going to www.nopatanswers.com and click on the Support Us button. You can also send a check to RCM P.O. Box 507, Ocean, New Jersey, 07755. We are grateful you are listening to the podcast and pray it helps you strengthen your faith and witness.
Before we start up again, I want to tell you about our next conference, or the annual conference for No Pat Answers, on April 25th. And this year we have the privilege of having Elisa Childers be our guest speaker. You know, there's a movement out there called the Progressive Church, and it's really denying the reality that the Bible tells us that Jesus is alive from the dead and that He's Lord of all. There's so much to this, but many people are falling for the lies about whether the Bible is the Word of God, whether Jesus is alive from the dead, and whether they've been indoctrinated to dogma, and that we really should just put all those things aside and just include everybody and everything, really be a postmodern liberal church. And so Elisa has really dug into this issue, really looked at all the things that are necessary for us to steer away from this and not be adrift in doctrine, but really see the reality of who Jesus is. So she and I will be speaking that day, April 25th. It's a Saturday. You can go to njconference.com and register for the conference, or go to my website, www.nopatanswers.com, and you can see some information there about how to register for our annual conference. I hope to see you there.
I would agree. Everyone has an opinion, everyone likes to be heard. I think that's really what it comes down to, which is a good thing. It's good to share your opinions in a discussion group, and it's especially good when you can share those opinions and it's a genuine discussion where you're engaging in, oh, this is how I analyzed the speaker. Okay, the speaker can now communicate back to me
Mm-hmm.
what I got right and what I got wrong, and for me to truly understand it.
Right.
And that's what I mean when I say activities.
Right.
You can use that to truly understand what the goal is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we help people, especially younger people, understand that there is an absolute right and an absolute wrong? There is something that we, from my generation, obviously this wasn't a question. Whereas we've moved, and I don't think that our culture really understands the transition that we're going through. I don't think we're out of it yet. I think we're still going through the transition of moving from something being absolute truth or absolutely true to being me having my truth and you having your truth. And how do we bring people back to understanding, like, there is only one way that goes north, and there is only one way that goes to any other compass directions. Either Christianity is true and it is of immense importance, or it's not true and it's of no importance. So it's one or the other, right?
Right.
So how do we get to that place where people have, not that I think your generation is responsible for it, I think it's people in my generation that basically dismantled truth or deconstructed truth to a place where there is no absolute right and wrong. There is no absolute truth or falsity, and that sort of thing. So, and I'm not fishing here. I'm really looking for answers on how do we get a generation to really sit up and take notice and say, oh, yeah, never thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a good way of achieving that is promoting basic analytical skills, like evaluating a sentence and what it really says, and not teaching people to interpret the sentence and find out what it means to them.
Right.
That's a very basic, fundamental idea that if you apply that basic idea to bigger ideas, then you have the ability to look at something objectively.
That's
instead
really good.
of having
Yeah.
it be subjective.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
I think that just applying it to very basic skills, to very basic ideas, and showing younger people that this applies on a small level, but if you take it, you can also apply it on a bigger level, and that gives them the ability to follow it through.
That's great. That's really good. Kellen does some debating. He's part of a team that goes around, and so he's gotten some things really down straight that a lot of young people never even venture to go and learn or talk about. But one of the things that you've learned to do is some logic and understanding, like you were just saying, the basic premises that make up an argument and how to arrive at conclusions. And how's that helped you really navigate through the culture that you're in, because you're right in the middle of it?
It's helped a lot to shift through all the fuzzy stuff and all the nice things that are said and all the fluff, to really get down. I know me as a person, I don't like filler and fluff. I like, give me one sentence and one idea,
Right.
and that's the idea. I don't need a whole long explanation to explain one premise.
Right.
And that has helped me when someone's talking to me, or I'm having a really long conversation with someone who does a lot of fluff. It helps me shift through all of their fluff, and to
Right.
get out of them really what they're trying to communicate to me, to understand someone else's ideas through everything that they say.
Great. If you had a few things you wanted to say to your generation, right? Let's deal with your generation first. What would those things be? What do you think would be helpful to someone else who's in their mid-teens or even in their later teens, maybe even their early teens, to help them?
You don't know everything, right? There are other points of view to every idea and problem. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, and yours might be bad.
Good. And if you were talking to, I wouldn't say your parents, but parents of teens your age, what would you say to them?
I think I would say the same exact thing. That it's not a bad thing to look at something you're doing right now, right? You're dealing with an idea or a problem that you have held on to for a very long portion of your life, and that is a hard thing to look at from a different point of view, but it's a good thing to see something with fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, now you know why I wanted to have Kellen on and talk to him and have him share his heart. I think he's got his hand on some really important issues. And if you're somebody who really wants to help the church, really bridge that gap between those of us who are growing older and our younger folks that are around with us, I think Kellen and I had a good discussion today to be able to breach some of these things so that we can really make a difference, because one day we're going to be gone. Talk about my generation. What are we leaving behind, and who are we leaving it to? That's the next question that we really have to deal with, or the issue we have to deal with. Teenagers aren't just people that we entertain until they grow up and get married and have kids, but they really are the church today, part of the church today, and need to be active in the church today, not just in some subgroup, but part of what we're doing and learning and being a witness to the world around us. So that was a great conversation. You could see that Kellen's going to come back and we're going to have more conversations like this. I want to talk to the young people that really struggle with the way that we're doing church. You know, it's not the substance of Christianity that really pushes them away. It's the activity of church. It's, are we making ourselves really relevant to them without sacrificing the substance of what we know to be Christian, to be true, to be what the Bible teaches? That's really the important thing. And we want to be able to, first of all, share the gospel with our young people, tell them why we believe Christianity is the truth and why they should believe it as well, so that they can become witnesses to their generation. I hope you've enjoyed today, and we'll come back in another 4 or 5 days, have another podcast, and we'll cover better things, more things, I should say, that we can be able to get our minds around and learn how to be a Christian case-maker.
You've been listening to Apologetics for the Rest of Us with Dr. Ray Ciervo. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and subscribe to our podcast. Also, please visit our website at www.nopatanswers.com, where you'll find more information about conferences and seminars. If you have questions for Dr. Ciervo, you can email him at info@nopatanswers.com. Have a great day, and God bless.